Welcome, everyone. Happy Monday. My name is Meg. I am part of PowerToFly's virtual hosting team, and I'm super excited to be talking to y'all today and ready to present this amazing duo from Procore that we have here. Before we get started, I do just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items, especially if you are new to Bevy. So let's get started with that. So if you want to check and see how this works as opposed to our normal Zoom area. If you go into the chat tab, you have the option of the general chat section, which is much like the Zoom chat used to be. You can also click on the Q&A button. That allows you to either add your own questions to the list of questions here that I can raise to our lovely panelists, or you can also upvote any questions that you would like to have answered. So definitely take a look at that Q&A bank and make sure that you upvote any questions that interest you so that way we can prioritize those in today's discussion. DMs, as pretty self-explanatory, are to be used to communicate directly between yourself and somebody else that's in the chat today. If you click on the attendees button, that'll show you everybody that's in today's session. That's where you can go to start a DM with them. And that's pretty much all you need to know for today. So again, if you do want to send a DM to ask a question privately, feel free. Those will remain anonymous. And we are going to be recording today's session. So everybody that registered for today's session, whether or not they join us, or even if they only join for part of the time, you'll get an email in about 1 to 2 days with a link where you can rewatch this recording. We'll also eventually post it to our YouTube channel. We are at PowerToFly, but that will not obviously happen for a couple days. If you want to keep up with us on social, you're more than welcome to. We are at PowerToFly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as Facebook. So please feel free to do so. So to get us started, I want to introduce you to our amazing panelists. So first up, we have Maddie Jackson. Maddie is an account executive at Procore, working with project owners in the construction space. Think big box retailers or large community developments. She has been with Procore for 5 years, moving up the sales ranks, starting as an intern with cold calling. Maddie is driven by connecting with people and problem solving, both for clients and coworkers. So welcome, Maddie.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. A little bit of an echo there.
So sorry. Then following Maddie, we have Rebecca Carpenter. Rebecca is a solutions engineer at Procore, working with general contractors around the US regarding how they apply Procore solutions to construction outcomes. She's been with Procore for 3 years, and prior to software, she worked in the construction industry as an elevator project manager in Texas for 5 years. She started at Procore as an account exec and quickly became a solutions engineer by demonstrating technical skills and soft skills that produced outstanding results. So welcome. All right. Get started on today's questions. I do want to just call out really quickly that Procore is hiring. So if you are at all interested in connecting with Procore or even just learning more about them, I'm going to throw a link into the chat general tab in just a moment. This is what Procore, the link that I'm going to add is going to take you to Procore's page on PowerToFly. Now it's going to look like this, and especially in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you're going to see a big pink follow button. So like I said, this is where you can get company info on Procore. You can also check out some of their events. So events like today, past chat and learns that they've participated in, or you can see what other events they're going to participate in with us, like our virtual job fairs or our summits. So the other thing you can do is you can click that open jobs tab and check out the open roles that Procore currently has listed with us. The one thing that's important to check out there is that if you look at those open roles and there's nothing really that suits you or anything that you really feel like applying for right this minute, like I said, definitely click that follow button that's at the top of that page on the right-hand side. What that's going to do for you is it's going to put you on their follow network, and it kind of works like your friend at the company. So it tells Procore that you are very interested in working with them, regardless of whether or not you filled out an application. But it also works as your friend at the company because it tells you when Procore posts new roles. So it's really nice to kind of have that additional, step in there, so that way you don't have to keep coming back and rechecking job boards that sometimes feel like they never change. So definitely take advantage of that. You can follow as many companies on PowerToFly as you like, and you can follow and unfollow companies at will. So definitely, if you're interested in working with Procore, make sure you click that follow button. It is a great way to make sure that you stand out apart from the crowd. Again, I'll share that link in the general chat tab in just a moment. So we're going to go into this slide towards the end of today's presentation, but before we jump into the questions, I just want to talk a little bit about the principal themes for today's conversation. So hopefully with some of the things you'll glean today are tips about breaking through any limiting beliefs you might have, understanding and achieving confidence and credibility to lead through mastery, as well as a tangible framework for turning fear into bold communication. So to get us started here, I'm going to jump into the QA bucket and see if anybody has upvoted any of these. Oh, a lot of them have been. Okay, so let's get started here. I'm going to position or pose this question to both of you. This person had wanted to know, how have you managed being the only female voice in the room, both internally and externally? Do you have any tips and tricks for navigating this space?
Yeah, I'll take that one to start because Rebecca and I were actually just discussing this maybe 10 minutes ago, right before we hopped on. Couple different avenues to go down. Of course, the internal voice is very important, but what I've found at Procore is that in a male-dominated industry, and sales is heavy male-dominated as well, it's that external voice and finding the right male champions for you. I've had calls where I've been on with 20 different men and I've been the only female on the Zoom call. And there was an example that I had that I was talking to Rebecca about where we were all solutioning a problem and I presented an idea. And then about 20 minutes later, that same idea was, accidentally represented by someone else. And I had a male champion Slack me and say, "Hey, Maddie, step in, advocate for yourself, and say, I'm glad that we all agree that that is a potential path that we could go down." And that empowered me so much on that call. And then future calls, I'm like, now I can own my ideas. Like at that time, I was like, I'm just glad that we all agree and we're moving forward. But it's really about that advocacy for yourself, owning your ideas, not being afraid to throw them out there. There's no bad ideas, and allowing men to be champions for you when it's only men in the room.
Really good point, because it can feel like if you're trying to be part of the team, right? And you don't want to be like, well, that was my idea, because that seems, really grabby or really attention seeking. There are sometimes, a lot of times, where if somebody is seconding your idea, that might seem to get a little bit more play than you originally positioning the idea. Rebecca, did you have anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I think it starts in the morning with however you get ready. If you know you're going into a meeting or a space that's you're going to be a minority, and that's just not just for women, but anyone who might not look like the majority of the room. I think it starts with the self-talk and have stories in your mind about the time that you exceeded expectations against all odds, or have it ready in your mind. It sounds estimating my ability. If you hear that, can I tell you about a time I actually was able to do this? And then, so it goes back to that credibility. If you don't know your craft, the imposter syndrome will get very big. So if you master what you need to know and know what you don't know, but when you walk in fiercely in the way that you feel confidently. Confidence will speak louder than any words that you can say in that meeting. And don't apologize for anything that doesn't need an apology. I think women apologize too often. We can be the one that wants to make the room feel nice, and that's not always our job. So do the job that you're there to do, and don't absorb any of the other emotions or things in the room that are not directly aligned with the mission at hand. And if people point out your differences and say like, oh, well, you think differently, or they're pretty much saying we're not alike. If they say that, bring up exactly what you're alike. I think we have a mutually aligned goal that looks like this. We're going to be able to achieve these with things that we can do together. So just bring them back to how we are the same and how we're not different. And then after the fact, not in the moment, I would take the time to confront somebody, not confrontationally, but just with kind curiosity. I wondered why you said this particular way. Could we talk about maybe, your thoughts around this? Or so that's what I would do in the moment. Calm, cool, collected, and awesomely confident in whatever you're wearing, how you look, and what you told yourself that morning.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right. Hi, Maddie. Maddie's back.
I'm back. Sorry, I think I somehow kicked myself out of the room.
No worries. We had while you ladies were speaking, we also had a comment from Christina saying it would have been even better if he would have said, yes, that's a great point that Maddie brought up earlier. I think it can be really difficult, like Maddie had said, if you have that male champion in the room, or even just a coworker that can kind of flag that for other people, that's great. But don't be afraid to like Rebecca had said, kind of confront the matter. And it could be just something as simple as what Christina said, like, oh yeah, that meshes really nicely with what I had said earlier. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that? Or is there any way that you think my idea could be improved on? It sort of gives you that ownership without necessarily seeming too territorial about it, and more of that like team building kind of way. All right. So let's go to in one of our other questions that was pre-submitted. And keep in mind, y'all, I have not put every question that was pre-submitted into this Q&A bank. I've been trying to, but I know we don't have a ton in there right now. There's only 2. So as the ladies are speaking, I will add more questions there. But do not hesitate if you have a question you would like to ask. Go ahead and put it into this Q&A bank, and I will try and make sure we get to as many of those as possible. All right. So this other question had a lot of upvotes. This person had written in asking, how can we create more space for women in our jobs? How can we explain the importance of hiring women to our employers? It's self-explanatory to me, but not really necessarily to your company or to your coworkers in general. So how would you go about answering this?
I'll kick it off. I see this as a twofold question, and I think that when we think about creating more space for women in our jobs, it's by nailing the jobs that we're doing and doing them really well, promoting ourselves out of positions, and then walking through that door, leaving it open, reaching out to your network and hiring the females that you know. And then when they join, ensuring they're successful. So investing the time in them to help train, support, make them feel included, make them feel like there's space for them at the company and like they're valued and successful. And then when we think about that second part to the question, how do you let your employers know the importance of hiring women? Rebecca and I were talking about this earlier, and we were discussing how Procore doesn't hire to fit our culture. This is a concept that one of my other female colleagues brought to me last week. We hire to round out the culture. And we don't want to hire people that are exactly like all of us. We need to hire people with different backgrounds that have different lenses to view a problem. If you have a room full of 10 people that have gone to the same school and studied the same thing and lived in the same town, they're going to have the same type of solution, and it might work. But if you have 10 different people from all walks of life, from all over the world, and you're looking at that problem, you're still going to have that great solution. You're going to have 9 others to consider. And that's where you're going to be able to solve the problems at a very, very good pace. Anything you want to add, Rebecca?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, for working for Procore, I came here because the job descriptions were inclusive, the hiring practices, I saw it on places like this. Their recruitment efforts are diverse in and of themselves. So I think we give ourselves a better landing strip or roadmap, if you will, to getting candidates that are better. Once they're here, making sure that the space is inclusive for people before they get there. You don't build a table and then ask people to come to dinner and realize that they don't sit in those chairs or they don't eat off that type of thing. You want to build the table with them. So I think they've done a good job from a facility standpoint, from the bathrooms to how it's laid out, to personal privacy, to how we start meetings. They're not always about sports. They're about topics that could apply to a vast majority of people. So I think that's how you continue to make space. And also when you see an opportunity to let someone else speak for themselves, like when I was in construction, I had one admin at one point that was a female. She did the majority of the work on this project, but when we got into meetings, she wasn't often asked to talk about her own work. Someone else would summarize her work for her. And I thought, Vicki should talk about the work Vicki does and have a voice here. So got her to say what she had done for the last week. Could I invite Vicki to the meeting? Why is there a reason she's not here? So also, just like you said, sometimes you got to step up to step backwards and you're not the one talking for them. Other times you can speak for them until they are allowed to be there or can be there equally. I don't see that so much at Procore. My very first day joining the team, I was buddied with a female salesperson. I was welcomed by females on my team, but that's not the experience for everyone. But I think Procore lays a good foundation, and we continue to build the walls that think about people who are here, but who aren't here yet. And how can we include them before they're here, so that they're comfortable when they get here.
That's a really good point. I love that idea of things not yet here. I feel like in the hiring world, we hear a lot of people talking about, well, we want a good culture fit. And you're right, that leads to a lot of the same kind of people getting the same kind of, being in the same kind of rooms. And so when we think about what your culture's missing, which is what we usually tell people, you're right, that's how you get more, you get true diversity, you get more representation within your room of people, like even just people within your customer base, or people that you would like to be in your customer base. So that's a really good way of putting it. I've never heard anybody talk about it as like, how can we prepare the room for the people that aren't here yet? I love that. So we do.
If I could add,
oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I want to add one thing that came to mind as I was thinking. We often get the opportunity, well, every day, if you're in the roles that Maddie and I are, to speak with companies, construction companies who might have that one woman in the room, and she might be being overlooked in the conversation. So we have an ability and maybe an obligation to facilitate circles of conversation that include everyone in the room. So if they've overlooked her, I often will go and say, what did Patty think? Or Patty, you have any questions? Because whoever's in her room isn't asking her. So just paying attention to who was able to talk and making that space, even if it's outside of our company and what the companies we're talking with. I find that to be really meaningful when I hear someone speak that wouldn't have unless we asked them to. So.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so jumping back into more of our questions here. This person had written, do you have any advice for a young woman who is brand new to sales culture in the tech world? How do we navigate boundaries, expectations, and relationships with male leadership for the first time? And I think this is great. And even if you are closer to that newness than you were, than some of us, it's also, especially with so many people changing roles right now or changing industries right now, there's probably a lot of people that may not be new to corporate, but might very much be new to sales. So let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I started at Procore about 5 years ago, and I was new to tech sales, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I'm very, very happy that I chose to join Procore. I would say my advice would be, don't go in with a preconceived notion of what sales tech culture is, because there are some incredible milestones and incredible growth that we've seen in the past even 2-3 years at Procore. And Procore is a very innovative company. We're helping define what it means to be inclusive. However, I think that all of sales tech has moved forward in such a big way. So drop the preconceived notion. However, make sure that you stick to what's like your own values and understand going into the company, hey, this is what I'm not willing to compromise on. This is what I want out of the job. This is what I want out of my mentors. These are the qualities that I'm looking for. And maybe even write it down so that as you go through the onboarding process and sales and tech, it's very, very fun. Everything is awesome. People are very passionate. But you can always refer back to like your own personal values and what you wrote down. And those can change. They can morph, however you grow. But knowing that you're going into something as yourself and you want to grow yourself, you're not going to change who you are and what your personal values are just to fit the company.
Yeah, I wrote down this idea of managing up. I think as we think about people managing down, Procore used the term more than I had heard it before about managing up. Although I realized I had been doing that, I just didn't know the terminology for it. But I think coming into a meeting that's structured and getting a get to know you with your boss, like as I came into tech culture, like Maddie said, I actually had no preconceived notions of what tech culture was. I was coming from construction. I thought that there was a lot of diversity. I mean, I thought, wow, there's so many women here, because I wasn't one. I didn't realize that there was still a percentage that we were working on, or milestones that they had created or improved upon. So that was great to hear. But also just leveling as a human with your manager. What are the things you like? How do you communicate? How do you learn? These help them understand me and me understand them right off the bat. What are your pet peeves? What does success look like for you? How will I know when you're happiest throughout the day, so that they know that about me? So I guess if they don't come to you having a structured get to know you, make sure you know what you want them to know about you in the beginning. So it helps your conversations and managing together over time.
I love that. Awesome. Okay, so we've got a lot of questions popping up here in the chat, so we're going to talk. I do see a couple that are maybe a little bit more role focused at Procore. So Christina, I see yours. We're going to hold that towards the end when we've got another Procore team member that's going to talk to us a little bit more in depth about Procore's hiring right now. So we'll save that for a little while. Aubrey had written in saying, imposter syndrome is so real. How do you overcome it, and how can we help other women to overcome it, especially when not everybody seems to talk about it? It's been a buzzword recently, but it's not something that necessarily was talked about before, and it's also not something that people necessarily talk about at work in terms of themselves.
Yeah, I think that lends itself to the topic of this discussion, that credibility piece. I always feel so much more confident and credible when I've done my research on a company, when I understand their specific pain points before going on to a phone call. It really helps solve for my imposter syndrome. Like if I know what I'm talking about and I understand the company and I've respected them enough to do that research and go in with a level of empathy towards their problems, then within even 10 seconds, they might have a preconceived notion. You're a woman selling into construction. Within 10 seconds of setting the right agenda and telling them, hey, this is my intent for the call. This is what I understand, confirming that with them, understanding their roles, their responsibilities, immediate respect is gained. And that's kind of the silver lining of being a woman in construction, is you have the room to gain that respect.
I love that. I think credibility, as I came into the elevator industry, I knew nothing about all 4,500 parts of an elevator and how I knew the general, up and down, right? But as I got to learn that, I knew what I didn't know. And I knew that I would never want to lie to people. I would never pretend to know something I didn't know. And I would do what I said I was going to do after the meeting. And I had a mentor, thankfully, that told me those things early on. So I didn't try to have answers that seemed like they weren't fully baked. You can lose credibility really quickly if you don't know. So master your craft, know what the milestones are, and check in with someone who you idolize or who's doing it like that today to say, am I at a successful level of understanding? Or is this imposter syndrome about not being the right fit for this? Is this, part of my psychological makeup, or is this really foundationally in the fact that I don't know the stuff well enough? So if you know that you know it well enough, then it's really just your mental stability of knowing that you can do the job, and that even though you haven't seen it before in somebody else, that you're going to be maybe the first one that does it. And also, don't accept imposter syndrome from other people. I read an article the other day that says society's kind of given us this idea that women can't do these things, and they set us up for imposter syndrome in a particular way. So I accept imposter syndrome as a real thing because I know that I experience it. But I also know that the most successful people in the world have it, which makes me feel really good about my path and where I'm going, because I'm doing things that I've never done in ways that we've never seen them. And that means I might be unsure at times. And I don't have to have the pressure of knowing everything. And I'm a solutions engineer. They call me the expert of every product line. That is a heavy title. I mean, you go into a call, you don't know something, you were brought on as the person to know it. I mean, you have to be okay with facilitating how people feel, because more than how people remember what you say, they remember how they feel when they leave the meeting. So you can always control that, and then follow up with what you didn't know in the time that you said you would do it. Do what you say you're going to do. And that is a quality everyone can get around until you know what you're doing, in every way. So.
And Rebecca, you bring up a really good point, which is like, you get called in to be an expert on something. And that, like you said, it's a heavy set of expectations to come in on. But yes, you might be an expert, you may be like even just the most senior person in the room, but kind of dovetailing into that idea that people will remember how they felt when they left the meeting. If you make sure that not only are you know the things that you are supposed to know, but if you don't, you understand that, you admit it, and you say, that's fine, we'll go get the answers for you, or this is where I think we can start. Letting people know that not only knows things, but you're also that person that's not afraid to say when you don't know things, gives you a lot more credibility than the person that's like, no, I'm the expert, but I don't know, or like tap dancing around the idea that maybe you're unsure about something, or maybe you need to double check something, because we all do. Like, none of us are autodidacts. None of us have, just these amazing computer-like memories. That's why we have computers. So definitely take advantage of that. Maddie, anything you'd like to add before we move on?
No, just to that topic, like I am the person that calls in Rebecca as the expert. So I'd say leverage your resources. It's really incredible what Procore has for us in terms of L&D or just specialists across the board, because there are people in Rebecca's role that specialize in one product. So we can always go a layer deeper, get them the right answer, not, fake it to them. It is at the end of the day selling to someone who does know what they're doing, and you can lose credibility in an instance if you lie or try to stretch the truth.
That's very true. We've also got Christina coming off in the chat saying that she's loving that Rebecca paraphrased that Maya Angelou quote. And also she loves, Maddie, when you said that feeling confident and credible is about doing your homework ahead of time, and that kind of helps solve that imposter syndrome. All right, so to kind of jump off that into a really great next question, this person had asked, as a woman, I constantly feel the need to prove that I'm worthy of my job, that I'm better than what the other people around me think I am. Has this ever happened to either of you? If so, could you maybe talk about a time that it did? And do you have any advice on how to either short circuit it or just make it stop preemptively?
Rebecca, I feel like your experience before Procore might lend itself to this question.
Yeah, so worthy of your job. When I hear that, I first want to say, are you in the moment where you have to be okay with moving forward, and how do you do that quickly? Or are you later thinking about this? I think there's two different things in how I would approach it. In the moment, I've come up with a self-regulating, quick little model, and I'll share it with you. It's called the off-ramp. So I'm on the highway, we're all cruising in the meeting. I get triggered by something, or there's a microaggression in the room, and I'm like, ugh, that did not feel good. I want to address it. My blunt and very candid self would like to stop the meeting to address it. At times, that's not the best approach, especially if the person cannot actually digest that information in front of others. If you're going to give feedback to the side, that kind of thing. So what I would do is take an off ramp. I would go slower. Think about when you take an off ramp. I take a deep breath. I regulate why I think this. I realign to what we're here to do, the mission of what we're doing. What is the fact? Because this could either be something I'm telling myself, stories that I hear, assumptions I'm making in the room. So I would just go back to the foundational facts of the room that you know about, and that is I have the requirements to do this job. I can solve problems with them. I can slow down and take a breath, or even remove yourself. If you need to go outside, go to the bathroom or something, come back in, if you can do that in a second, and then realign to the mission at hand. After the fact, I would ask yourself some self-reflection questions. So are these things that people have done to make me feel this way? Or do I feel this way because of my own internal makeup and what I need to talk to myself about for credibility, confidence, and realign? So I would say if you're feeling like other people are making you feel less worthy, there might be some language there that needs to be discussed and talked about also. I would want to have a conversation with them to the side, or even have a sponsor. If you're going to have champions that you've built within the company that really have your back, ask them to have a conversation with that person. I'd like to talk to Joe about why he said that in the meeting. Do you mind being there because you thought it felt a little bit weird too? So if you feel it needs to go that direction, face it front on. People like people who can be honest and very candid and real with them. But in the meeting, take an off ramp. It doesn't mean you need to leave the meeting or stop going in that direction, but you can just slow down, take a breath, and get back on, because there will be moments that you're triggered by microaggressions in a room, and it can't divert the overall mission at that moment. But it can later be something that you circle back to, and you should, especially if it's happening repeatedly.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that off ramp, Rebecca. I'm so going to use that. I personally have a 24-hour rule, and it's things in my life. If I'm upset or if I feel triggered, I say, give it 24 hours. And that's advice that I got from my mom. And typically in 24 hours, I have a lot more clarity on how I want to approach the situation. I always call my mom too, even with professional advice. I'm like, Mom, this happened. What do I do? So I'd say reach out to people who aren't even at your company. You don't have to go, I mean, it is of course great to use your manager and HR. They're trained in this and they're your advocates, but ask your network, your friends, your family, and 99% of the time they've gone through similar situations, tried something out, and they can tell you whether it worked or whether it didn't. To bring it back to Rebecca's other point, like if it's internal versus external, there's kind of different ways that you could solution feeling the need to prove yourself worthy of the job. If it's internal, L&D all day, leverage what you have around you, learn, develop, make sure you have that confidence through credibility. If it's external, there does come a point where it is unacceptable. And I know at Procore, we have a zero tolerance policy to non-inclusive language and behaviors. And you, as much as it sometimes is difficult to have those conversations, might want to reach out to your manager or HR as well.
I think it's one of those times where, especially when it's external and you want to be the team player, right? You don't want to be the person that seems to be, you don't want to, especially when it seems like maybe there's a chance you're misinterpreting what this person's saying, or maybe you're the only one that's interpreting it as a slight or as like a ding. My favorite, which I got from my mother as well, so I'm fully on the like, let's ask the moms. My mom's favorite thing to do is she calls it painting someone into the nice corner. So if you can do it in the moment, because it does, for me, I'm not great at confrontation, but it is a great little tool to use. But even not like after the moment has passed, you lead with something like, I'm sure you didn't mean to make it sound blah, 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 like however you felt it. Like, I'm sure you didn't mean to make it sound like you were undercutting my position here. But could you explain to me, could you tell me what you were trying to say? Because I know that couldn't have been it. And it's a really great way, because if that person didn't mean it the way you necessarily took it, then it gives them that great out to say, oh, no, I meant blah, 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 blah. But if they have the option, which most people, in my experience, generally don't take, to step right over that corner and go full jerk. And I mean, let's be real. I've done this a time or two in my own life. I've been that person that was like not handling things the right way. We've all done it. But it's one of those ways that I find that you can lead with compassion and lead with, kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt, necessarily making yourself a doormat for them, by trying to be the good person or trying to be the bigger person there. So yeah, that's something that's worked for me. We've also got a lot of talk in the chat here that Rebecca, your off-ramp thing really went over big with a lot of people. Christina brings up a really good question, saying, does the person who asked that question of you, are they trying to convince themselves first? I feel like projection is a thing that I talk about with my therapist a lot, about like, the things that you don't like about other people are the things that you really don't like about yourself. Or are you nitpicking somebody else because you're trying to preemptively make sure they're not nitpicking you? So Christina, I love that call out that, worrying about yourself before you're worrying about, kind of undercutting others is helpful, but that doesn't mean everybody else is doing it too. So that motivation can be really helpful to remember. All right. Okay, so Christina also had a really great question that she put in the chat here. So let's go into that. Following up on the communication piece that y'all were talking about previously, how does one communicate successfully and positively in things like Slack or chat when a lot of times that tone can be lost? I come up against this a lot, especially since PowerToFly is always, we've been a remote distributed company from the jump, right? So I've only met like 3 of my coworkers, and you come up against a lot of that feeling, especially because we're women, of feeling like if you don't have at least like 2 exclamation points in your email, you're going to come across as bitchy or terse or short with somebody. But I'm also the kind of person that doesn't think, again, total generalization, that like from a legal background, which is what I came from, emojis do not have a place in professional emails. Like, it just undercuts your seriousness, and people aren't going to think that you know as much as you do. So if you're faced with those kinds of maybe self-imposed, maybe societally imposed structures, how can you make sure that communication in things like Slack or chat doesn't get misconstrued?
I agree with you, Megan, that it's different. Like, communicating as a woman, it's different. And of course, across internal platforms and external, it's different as well. So when communicating with clients, I know one of the other questions that we were asked, I'm just going to try to thread into here, is being a woman and then changing your tone based on other people's perceptions of what women should speak like. I personally love exclamation points. Like I am an exclamation point girl, and I try to take some of them out of my emails, but I don't want to lose my tone entirely. I don't want to fake it to clients. And I think that there's a ton of great men in this world, and I think they love that. They love the passion and the excitement. And it also takes a lot of stress off of myself to not have to edit my tone and edit myself out of my tone. Internally, when using Slack, um, I don't know. That was kind of difficult. I think at Procore we have a pretty like positive way of talking to each other. So I've been really lucky in so far as like even talking to my team. You know, they're all guys right now, but we speak respectfully, but with a level of openness and like fun that I don't feel like I have to really edit myself too much. Of course, keep it professional because anything on professional communication will always be that professional communication. But really just, I guess, I don't know, having fun with it while maintaining that professional boundary is, I guess, how we do it. Anything to add, Rebecca?
Yeah, I remember my first Slack message because I've learned several softwares since joining a software company. When I was in construction, we didn't have this. We yelled to each other in each other's offices, and that would just be yelling. So it was, hey, Steve, it comes to the office, whatever. So you always kind of knew where people stood because you're looking them right in the eye. And when I came into technology and I was going to work in this type of headset type of Zoom thing, that was my first thought was, am I going to communicate the same? Are people going to totally feel my essence of who I am and what I meant, my tone? So my first Slack was like 3 paragraphs, and they're like, this message I've ever gotten was like the response I got. And I was like, oh, I'm too formal. So I think until you get to know people, maybe lean to the side of, say hello. You don't just want to go at them for whatever you need from them. And that goes with any kind of chat. Building a formal, a better relationship with anyone you're going to work with, whether you have to have one Zoom or get to know you to do that. If you are going to work remotely, I like to just talk about Slack because I'm often demoing. My whole job is to have a demonstration of a platform going on from software while I'm talking to people. And I'll encourage them to use the chat in this way or to have fun. Or the account executive, like Maddie would be doing, she would be slacking me on the side while I'm talking to the client potentially. So I just tell people that I'm going to be working with in Slack, I like 1-word answers. If you want me to do something, put it in all caps. I don't like paragraphs while I'm trying to do. So just overly communicate what things mean to you in Slack and when they're appropriate. And so people just know, and respect the on off of, when people are in pause notifications. Look at how you set up so you're in a meeting. So just get good at the boundaries and the expectations of people. And overall, if it's excitement and passion, that should never be filtered or controlled or harnessed, I think. So I'm all about the exclamation marks and also just reading the room. You need to be a mirror if you're in sales. So if you hear the tonality of that room is a little bit lax or down and you just came off the best lunch ever, just have some cognitive awareness of where they're at so that you're not totally out of line as you enter a meeting. Or so feel your way around first, get to know people, and then start to Giphy, use those emojis. We go to town with all the expressive ways to communicate at Procore, which I love now. I'm an absolute Slack fan now.
Yeah, I think Rebecca brought up just such a good point. At the end of the day, people do communicate differently. And before you understand their communication styles, play it kind, play it nice. But then once you understand the way that they speak and the way they want to be spoken to, respect that and then work within those boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. If there's no harm in saying like, hey, this is how I normally do things. Is this okay for you?
Yeah.
And even it doesn't even necessarily have to be like a conversation you have a jump with every person you work with. You can always bring this up even later on in a working relationship if you feel like maybe the communication hasn't really gone the way you'd like it to. You can just say, hey, I feel like we're not on the same page here. This is what I mean when I do such and such and such, and I usually send information this way because it's how I process it best. Is that also true for you, or is there something, some adjustments we need to make to our communication style?
The last comment I'll make is, if you're in construction, probably going to hear cuss words. You know, I came from a sailor, Navy parents. I have direct communication style. This is why I chose construction, because it actually matches some of the tones and the people. If you happen to have a different one, though, that's also welcome. But you should ask when cuss words are acceptable. If you're in Procore, it doesn't come up as much, right? We're in technology, But if you're truly in construction, it's not always a disrespectful thing for some people, and then sometimes it is. So I think that's one thing you have to be very cognizant of, is the language you're using. And if other people cuss, it doesn't just mean that you have the ability to, or that you should. Ask your team when you think it's appropriate to use these terms and when it is not, so that everybody's on the same page. Because cussing does come up if you're in construction, which I happen to love. But if you don't love that, you should be just as honest about how you don't love that. Your grandma taught you not to say that, or whatever it was. And I will respect that boundary as well.
That actually brings up a really great point here. So there was another question that got posed. This person wanted to know, how can I be my true self, especially in a male-dominated environment? I have stopped talking and writing like I did in order to sound more respectable or professional to my male colleagues. I read some articles about how we shouldn't be changing our femininity, if that's what you want to call it, but I feel I will be treated as less of an equal if I do. So I find this is a really interesting thing, because depending on the industry, or even just the personal setting that you're in, there can be a lot of things that seem to be either a liability or aspects of your true self that seem to get highlighted in a negative way because of where you're working or the people you're working with. I mean, I've been in places where being somewhat fashionable is looked down on, because it's seen that you're not maybe necessarily focusing on certain aspects of the work or of the industry. I've also worked in places where, like Rebecca said, I was in manufacturing for a while, and if you weren't ready to get down and dirty and like help it, pitch in, hands in with the rest of everybody, it was frowned on. But also, if I was perceived to like not be swearing along with the rest of the crew, or trying to keep myself clean as opposed to like diving in and just doing it the dirtiest way to get the job done, that was somehow made me less suitable for the job or for the role. So how do you handle this, especially since you've both been in different industries as well as with Procore?
Yeah, for me, working in sales, a lot of it is the tone matching. Like Rebecca was saying, understanding if you're in a meeting and they are strictly business, I'm going to get down to business and meet them there. And if they want to do pleasantries, then I would love to like get to know them better and, chit chat about the weekend. And that's whether it's a man or a woman that I'm selling to. Like I would say this is agnostic of gender for the salesperson that I like to be or that I want to be. That said, I think internally there's a lot of space for people to be their authentic self at Procore. I don't feel like I need to take my exclamation points out of my emails. I don't think that I need to dress in a certain way. I can wear makeup. I can do whatever I want with my hair. We actually have our chief people officer has pink hair, and I think that's just incredible. Our leadership at the top level, at the C-suite, is expressing themselves however they want to express themselves. And I remember when we hired her, we were like, yes, this is amazing. Like, go Procore. Love to see that. Be yourself. Like, do what you want to do. Get your job done. Treat people well. But at the end of the day, you're going to be judged off of your results and the way that you treat people, and not what you wear and what you look like and how you type. And if you find those to be a professional like roadblock to yourself, then perhaps it's something with the environment that is toxic.
Yeah, this one hits close to home because, well, I'd like to say I'm a pretty expressive person, but also in construction, it came up a lot, whether it was the makeup I had on, the jewelry I was wearing, having red hair, having tight clothes, wearing heels, not having work boots on. Yeah, a lot of the times I would tell them it's not my intent to make you uncomfortable with the way that I look. It's not my intent to be a distraction because of the way that I look in this place. I want them to know that it's not my intent. My intent is to express myself fully so that I can bring my full self here so that we can achieve the goals that we've all set out to do. And by me being different, or what you'd consider unique or flamboyant, what all these things, that's just another element of the risk mitigation that I bring when we talk about things. Because if I can see around more corners or have different perspectives than you, aren't we going to be a better team? Do you agree in that? So like, if that shows up in this way, why does my hair make you feel uncomfortable? And I think if you can get to know people or have conversations, for me, it was going to work at the local, sports bar, not because I wanted to be there, but sometimes you do need to do some networking when you first get to know people so that you can meet them where they are. And so just meet people where they are so they can understand why you've become this person and how that plays a part in you being your best self. Also, break down old things that don't work anymore. The handbook at Otis, or I shouldn't even say that, but the handbook a long time ago used to say that women wore hose and heels. And I said, so I got to wear hose? Like, I couldn't believe how outdated some of the stuff was. It said that I was dressed appropriately or not. Or if you were a bigger person, I've always been little plush size, and I like that. But we can wear the same clothes as a small girl. Why is it more significant when I wear something than somebody else? So I would say push back on the social constructs of what gender is, what expression is, what your clothing, and let them know you're not trying to be a distraction or make them uncomfortable. But if they are uncomfortable, that you seek to understand their uncomfortability so that we can come to a place that is more mutually inclusive and efficient, effective, words that they like and can associate with business. The other thing is keep a bag in your car. I remember going to a job site walkthrough that was supposed to specifically be a business meeting, and they turned it into a site facility walk because everybody else in the room had on the clothes to go do it. So if you are going to wear something that is a little bit different than the rest of everybody, have some stuff in your car. Be overly prepared. I can always change my clothes immediately if I had on something that was different. I'm going to know the rules to take off my jewelry as soon as we get to a job site. You're never going to once have to remind me of a rule or regulation that is because of what I had on, because now you can push it to that. So know what places you can exist in and how you exist. And when the rules don't state that, make sure you're the first one to follow them so they can't find a reason why your expression now has to do with safety or do with something else. Know the handbook and contest it when needed.
I actually love that. So when I was in manufacturing, I had the same thing. I had an entire, I had a full set of Carhartts. I had my work boots. I had all this stuff, actually in a filing cabinet behind my door, so that I had it if I needed to go help out on the floor, out at the loading dock or whatever. But that way I could also make sure that I was coming to work in a way that if I got, taken out to lunch by a supplier, I was not going to feel underdressed or like I wasn't professional for the situation. But I love how you said, kind of challenge it where it needs to be, because if you are more than able to do the job and you're not being unsafe and you're not compromising the safety of other people, if they're distracted, that's a little bit more than a little bit on them. So if you're distracted, even though I'm doing my job correctly and I'm not hindering you from doing your job, then why are you distracted? Are you focusing on things other than the job? Because that's a you problem, not a me problem. So you're right. It can be really helpful to know that, be confident in what you're doing, that you are doing things by the rules, but just because you're doing them differently than somebody else and they're not used to that and they don't like it, doesn't necessarily mean that you need to change. Maybe the rules need to change. Maybe the perception coming from the other employees needs to change. So we only have about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we try and keep getting to everybody's questions. I know it always goes way too quickly. Like, you think it's going to be a long time, but yeah, right? It's nuts. Okay, so this one might be a little bit more tricky, so if you're not comfortable answering, I get it. This person had written saying, I found out that one of my male colleagues who does the same job as I do earns more than me. I suspect that it's a gender issue, but how should I best address this situation to my superiors? Frankly, I'm furious and know that that's not the right energy to bring to the conversation.
Okay, so first thing that comes to mind is I have like a not to talk about, refuse to speak about kind of policy when it comes to this stuff personally, because there will be times throughout your career, people want to discuss these things. And I would just practice your response. When I work with people who have medical disabilities or questions that people ask them that they don't want to answer, whether it be about work or about anything, you should practice your answer. Like, that's actually my medical information. I don't share that. Or with this, that's actually my personal compensation. I just make it a practice not to speak about that because I don't like to be in conversations about this. And the more understood the pay is across people, the more it comes up as if it's all the same, which was very weird for me because in construction, nobody talks about this stuff. But in larger, in other types of corporations, you kind of have an understood value to your job, so it does come up a little more. So just practice what you are and what you're not, and be uncompromised in that. If you do, and be highly educated in how much you're worth. You know, I have that shirt that says "Know your worth and add tax." I don't base that on what other people tell me. I go and Google that stuff. You need to be understanding about what your job is worth, and if you're meeting those requirements and you have a great way of showing your results, effort, and learning, you need to be able to be your best salesperson. If you're not naturally a salesperson during your performance reviews, get with someone who's very good at it, because you need to know how you're adhering to what they've set out as expectations and how you've met them, and structure a conversation. I, in this situation, would say, manager, I'd love to have a conversation with my compensation and the history of how I've been paid. Is there a time we could talk about that? And just meet it head on. And then ask, I need to make this amount of money over time. What's the best path to me doing that here at Procore? What's the best path to me doing that in construction? So that you're not asking for something you're not willing to do the work for. You're also not bringing up anything that you shouldn't probably know about or ask it about with others. And the comparison isn't about them. It's about where you want to go, how much you're worth, what do you know about the industry to get there, and how can you prove it and continue to lay out your value for a company while you're still there, not just during the hiring process, but when you're still there. Continue to build out your portfolio and your brand.
Rebecca, I think you answered that flawlessly. To be honest, I don't have much to add, but I think that one of the key takeaways there is that pay for performance conversation. And we're lucky at Procore that it's very transparent. We always have conversations with leaders about performance, about pay, and we run annual check-ins and then also a mid-year check-in. And I can't imagine that every company does such a good job of having those open conversations. So to Rebecca's point, request them. I would take the colleague out of the equation and say, based on my skills, my results, what I bring to the team, what I bring to the company, you have it in the back of your mind, you know how much that man is being paid, but I would take it out and say, this is what I've done for the company. This is what I do. What do you see next for me to achieve the level of performance that would get me this pay? And then if you don't have a tangible framework to walk away from that conversation with, keep asking until you're satisfied that you're going to be paid for your worth.
Those are really, really great points. Know your worth and add tax. That one's awesome. I absolutely love that phrase. Coming from a legal background, as I do, I also like to flag to people, because it's amazing and astonishing to me how many people don't know this. You are allowed to talk about your pay. You cannot be, just because a company says, well, we'd prefer you did it. I'm sure they would, because if if employees talk with each other about what they're paid, and any kind of animosity or whatever is left out of the equation, employees don't lose on that subject. The employers do, because it becomes more transparent about who's getting paid what. If I find out that, which I have done before, that my coworker is making more money than I am, I'm not mad at her, because that's not, she's not the one that decided, well, I'm going to make less. She, if anybody, not necessarily you have to be mad at anybody, but the person you need to talk to about this is either your manager or the HR department, because that's the kind of place that these are had. But to Rebecca's point, if you're not comfortable talking about that, that is totally fine. No one can make you. And especially if, like me, you are a person that is an open book. I don't care if you know what I make, because it's a fact and this is what I make. That's fine. Just make sure you are not, with your openness and honesty, you're not inadvertently pressuring other people to discuss it when they don't want to. That's the part that gets into illegalities, and it's just, it's also just rude. You don't want to pressure people to talk about their, things like that, especially things that are obviously private. Okay, so go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just going to say, the other thing that happens in construction offices, potentially because we're all wearing a lot of hats, and at Procore it's more easy to identify what your role is and how you're doing that role. So you're not going to absorb a bunch of roles that are not your role. But in construction or other types of work, my husband, he's in social work, and there's new caseloads. He works with kids in shelter, and he has to absorb these things. So be active in your conversation and negotiation ongoing if your job changes or the roles change. Vicky left, and now I'm a project PE also. She made about this amount from what I understand. What amount of that are you going to pay me? on top of the current role in order to absorb these roles. So just don't take on more work without being paid for it over and over and over. You'll find yourself in a resentful place if you do.
Thank you for flagging that, Rebecca. That's a very good point. Okay, so we only have about 4 minutes left. I'm gonna I'm gonna address one more question and sort of segue us in here. So I'm gonna share my screen so y'all can see what I'm looking at. Kind of coincides with this other question that was asked. Gender equality is a hot topic right now, but how can you tell in an interview if the company is really if the company is really comprised about by an inclusive workplace, or if that's what they're actively working towards? So obviously Procore is one of those places, but can y'all talk about, kind of what you enjoy about Procore, as well as how you knew when you interviewed at Procore that this was going to be an inclusive place to work?
Yeah, I'd say, of course, ask the questions about mission, vision, values, and ensure that you align to those, but it's really, how do you practice them? What are you actually doing to build an inclusive work environment? We have employee resource groups that span, we've got so many of them, they span like the likes of anything you're interested in or want advocacy for, and Procore sponsors those. And we have executive sponsors that are willing to lend expertise and budget for events to make us feel safe and included at the company. And I think that's that second layer question of, how do you actually practice what you preach? Anything to add, Rebecca?
Just keeping in mind that gender is a social construct. And I think in Western cultures, we think about that very much as a binary thing. And as we get more to a spectrum of how you maybe don't identify in these very binary, like male, female ways, I would just come with questions about how gender, positions itself in the company, or how have you seen people break those before? What ERGs, what active things do you have with employees that are working on the equality of all people, not just based on, that has to do with orientation, their gender, their expression, presentation, all those things. So I think as much as you're getting interviewed with them, you're interviewing them to see if they're a right fit. So hopefully you've done your research to ask questions to know if they're really backing up what they say. For me, for Procore, that definitely was the case. I left construction, sadly, because of a lot of these things that I had that kind of chipped away at who I was over 7 years. And I wanted a hybrid of being a place I didn't have to decompartmentalize. I could be my whole person and my whole professional self, and I didn't have to live these almost double separate lives. And so for me, Procore is a hybrid of that, and it's felt like that ever since. So,
Rebecca, especially important to remember that, if gender is treated like it is as a social construct and people are not held to the binary, not only does that help individuals who may not fall within one category or the other on the binary, but it also helps people kind of break out of those stereotypes that come from those gender roles, right? So it helps you break out of the stereotype that women don't belong in construction, or that you can't be pretty and also effective when it comes to sales. Like, these are important things to remember. Okay, so we also, before we run out of time, I want to bring up Aubrey, who is part of Procore's HR team. And I want to talk a little bit about the open roles that you have going on here. So Aubrey, is there anything specifically that you'd like to highlight on this open jobs list, or any tips that you have for somebody that's interested in applying?
Yeah, thank you for the intro. So as you can see, we have tons and tons of jobs that we're hiring for, and we will just keep opening more. So this is just a snapshot of what we have open right now. At the top left, you can see that we are hiring in sales. In fact, multiple roles for these. So multiple account executives, sales development representatives. I think we're just put on an industry consultant, sales engineers. So please check out our open roles if you're interested in sales. You can do that on our PowerToFly profile, or you can go to procore.com /jobs and apply to anything that you might be a fit for. One thing I did want to chat through really quickly was, Christina, you posted a really good question just about, there's a lot of senior level roles that we're hiring for right now. Like, what do you do if you see something you're interested in, but you might not completely align with those qualifications? It's interesting because as women, we will only apply to jobs if we hit 90% of those requirements, when men will identify with one and apply, right? So my advice to you, if you see something that you think, hey, I don't have all this experience, I might have some, don't disqualify yourself before applying. Apply, take the risk, and put your name in the hat, because you really don't know, the backstory to the role or who's currently in pipeline wild. You just don't know. So don't do yourself a disservice by disqualifying yourself. If you hit that 1 requirement, that 2 requirement mark, apply, do it, take a risk on yourself. We really do look for people who come from all walks of life, all experience levels. We talked a lot about not being a culture fit, but being a culture add. And that's truly what we hold ourselves to in our hiring and recruitment process as well. A really good example of that is one of our highest performing SDRs our sales development reps came from no sales background, right? They were a fisherman. They were a fisherman who was referred to Procore or found Procore from some other channel, and he has just been killing it. Absolutely. So I will say that untraditional background or this life experience that you've acquired really can pay off in ways that you had, not even imagined. So again, if you see something that interests you, even if you think, hey, this might be a stretch, I really do encourage you to apply and do that for yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aubrey. Just to highlight again, I have put a bunch of links in the chat where you can check out Procore's open roles. I've looked at our website. Currently, there's 239 listed with us. So definitely take advantage of that. Sorry, guys. Dogs are about to go nuts because the doorbell just went off. But yeah, it's definitely something you want to take advantage of. If you do apply through PowerToFly, that's awesome. We do have a customer service rep that checks up and follows up on your applications. But unlike a lot of other hiring people or hiring firms, we do not get a cut of your salary. We don't get we don't do anything negative for you as an applicant. All we do is try and help follow up with your application and make sure that nobody falls through the cracks, because we're all people working imperfectly in imperfect systems. So I want to say a huge thank you to Aubrey. Thank you so much for joining us to give us more of that insight on jobs at Procore. And a massive, massive thank you to both Maddie and Rebecca. Y'all killed it today. This is a really great chat. And I just absolutely loved spending the afternoon learning from you ladies. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Meg. You were incredible. And thank you to everybody who joined.
Yeah, it was really engaging. I loved it. Yeah, can't wait to do it again.
Hopefully we'll get to have you ladies back soon. Thank you again to all of our attendees and everybody who not only contributed such great questions prior to today's session, but also during. That was amazing, and it really makes these sessions even more fun to get that kind of input from y'all. So hopefully you all have a wonderful, Monday. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And hopefully we'll see many more of you joining us for events coming up in the future. Bye, everybody.